Right. So get ready, because today we are going to dive deep into a case. And this one's going to leave you with more questions than answers, I think.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to be examining the death of Suzanne Sills
Right.
and the subsequent trial of her husband,
Yes.
Dr. Scott Sills, who was a renowned fertility doctor.
Mm.
And at first glance, this case kind of looks like a tragic accident.
Sure.
So, picture perfect family, beautiful home, wife found dead at the bottom of the stairs. Sounds like a pretty open and shut case.
Yeah. An accident, right.
But when we start to dig a little deeper,
Yeah.
things get a little bit more complicated, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, one of the first things that inspired me about this case
Mm-hmm.
is that we're sort of conditioned to think
Mm-hmm.
that when there's a doctor present during, a medical emergency or some sort of accident,
Right.
that the person who's injured must have had, immediate care.
The best care. Right.
The best care.
Right.
But when you listen to the 911 call in this case,
Mm-hmm.
it's not that simple, is it?
No, it's not. And that's what makes this case so fascinating, right? Is
Yeah.
because you have that assumption.
Right.
Oh, a doctor was on hand. Everything must have been done that could be done.
Yeah.
But when you hear the 911 call,
Yeah.
it's really not that straightforward.
And the 911 call, I have to say,
Yeah.
it's a little unsettling.
It is.
And the prosecution really focused on that call.
Yeah.
And particularly the fact that he calls Suzanne the patient
Right.
and seems to almost hesitate
Right.
before he starts CPR.
Like he was.
Almost like he's distanced.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
They argued that really pointed to his guilt, that there was a deliberate delay there.
Mm-hmm.
The defense, though, countered with the concept of what they called doctor mode.
Okay.
And they said he was basically compartmentalizing, detaching emotionally
It's interesting.
to focus on the medical situation as a doctor.
Yeah.
And they also highlighted that
Yeah.
his daughter, Mary Catherine, was present.
Mm.
Yeah.
And said, she would have surely spoken up if something sinister had been going on.
It's tough, right? Because as a parent, you
Yeah.
want to believe
Yeah.
that a father wouldn't harm his wife
Right.
in front of their child.
In front of their child. Exactly.
But then the coroner's report comes back,
Right.
and we're talking a full year later.
Yeah.
The death is ruled a homicide
I-
by ligature strangulation.
Yeah.
And I mean, talk about a bombshell.
That was a huge moment in the case, right?
Yeah.
Because that
Yeah.
really fueled the defense's fire.
Yeah.
They said, look, there's bias here.
Oh, interesting.
The coroner must have been swayed by the growing suspicion around Dr. Sills.
Yeah.
But, regardless,
Mm-hmm.
the prosecution had to prove not just that Suzanne was murdered,
Yeah.
but that her husband did it.
Right.
And that's where the motive
Right.
becomes crucial.
Yeah. And that's where things get even more, murky, I guess.
Yeah.
The prosecution did offer up a few possible motives.
They said there was some financial strain.
Okay.
That Suzanne was maybe feeling disrespected by Dr. Sills' older children
Right.
who were from a previous marriage.
Yeah.
And they pointed to some heated text messages
Yeah.
from Suzanne
Yeah.
expressing a desire to leave the relationship.
It sounds like they were trying to build a case
Yes.
for, some reason
Right.
why he might have wanted her gone.
Yeah,
But
but the defense countered, right?
yeah, they did.
Yeah.
They countered those arguments pretty effectively. They
Right.
said the texts, sure, they were heated, but they were work related
Interesting.
because the couple worked together.
Oh, okay.
So they argued that, that kind of tension was just
Right.
their daily life.
Their daily grind.
Exactly.
Yeah, work-life balance, I get
Yeah.
it. But then there's this whole other element that gets introduced,
Okay.
which is Patrick.net.
Yes.
So Suzanne was active on this online political forum.
Yeah. And she was posting pretty personal things there, right?
Yeah.
Personal photos.
Yeah, including one that
Yeah.
was a little risque, I guess we could say.
Yeah, a bit suggestive.
Suggestive, yeah.
And then it gets even weirder, right?
It does?
After Suzanne's death, Dr. Sills reaches out
Yeah.
to the site owner
Yeah.
to have all of her information removed.
That's strange.
Yeah, so if this online activity was so harmless,
Right.
why be so concerned
Exactly.
about her digital footprint after she's gone?
Yeah, the defense tried to downplay it,
Right.
but screenshots and printouts of Suzanne's posts were found
Yeah.
in Dr. Sills' possession.
So it does raise some questions
It really does.
about what was really going on there with
Yeah.
that online activity.
And speaking of things not being what they seem,
Mm.
we have to talk about Marie Dalton,
Right.
the other woman in this story.
Yes.
So Marie was a former nurse
Mm-hmm.
who had this brief online relationship
Yeah.
with Dr. Sills
While he was still married
while he was still married to Suzanne,
to Suzanne. Yeah.
and her police interview. Have you seen that?
I have. It's pretty intense.
Yeah.
She seems to really believe that
Yeah.
Dr. Sills might have killed Suzanne
Yeah.
to be with her.
It's like she carries this guilt,
Yes.
almost like she feels partially responsible.
Absolutely. There's a palpable sense of guilt in that interview.
Yeah.
And she describes Dr. Sills as
Right.
being like a machine,
Yeah.
needing constant compliments,
Yeah.
reassurance. It's a pretty disturbing picture.
And then there's this letter
Yes.
that Dr. Sills sent to Marie just 2 weeks
Oh, wow.
after Suzanne's death.
2 weeks later.
Yeah, and it's in this very, like, weirdly formal
Really?
tone, almost robotic.
Huh.
And there's this one line where he refers to Marie as the original.
The original. Wow.
It's like he viewed Suzanne as replaceable.
It's a chilling thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it really does feed into that narrative.
Yes.
This was calculated. It wasn't a crime of passion.
Yeah.
This was something else.
Right. Because remember, the jury had this big decision to make, right?
Right.
First-degree murder, which means it was premeditated,
Mm.
or second degree, meaning a crime of passion.
Yeah.
And the prosecution really argued that the length of time
Right.
that it takes to strangle someone to death pointed to premeditation.
Right.
They said he had all these opportunities to stop.
To change his mind.
To stop. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But the jury came back with a verdict of guilty,
Okay.
but on the charge of second-degree murder.
Interesting.
And, some of the post-trial interviews
Yeah.
reveal that the jury, they didn't need a motive to convict, but they struggled to pin down
Interesting.
that premeditation element.
Yeah. So what do you think that means?
I don't know. It makes you think, right?
And it does.
Maybe there wasn't that concrete evidence
Yeah.
to definitively prove that he planned it.
Right.
Or maybe it's something in the details.
Yeah.
Or even Dr. Sills' demeanor gave them just enough doubt.
Yeah, you really have to wonder what was going through their minds
Yeah.
when they were deliberating.
Absolutely. And so with that verdict,
Mm-hmm.
the mandatory sentence was 15 years to life,
Okay.
which had it been first degree,
Yeah.
it would have been 25 to life.
So a big difference.
Big difference, yeah. And through it all, his children, Mary Catherine and Eric,
Right.
have stood by him,
Wow.
maintaining his innocence.
That's got to be incredibly difficult.
It's just heartbreaking
Yeah, everyone involved.
to lose your mother,
Yeah.
and then to have your father imprisoned
And to still believe
for her murder.
that he's innocent.
It's just, I can't even imagine.
It really speaks to the complexity of family relationships,
It really does.
doesn't it?
Yeah,
And how they can be tested in
Yeah.
these extreme circumstances.
absolutely.
Yeah, it really is. You know, when you look at this case, it's like you're trying to put a puzzle together.
Yeah.
And you've got some pieces that just don't seem to fit.
And those missing pieces, those unanswered questions.
Yeah.
I think those are the things that really stay with us.
It's true. And one of the biggest unanswered questions in this whole case is motive.
Right.
Like, the prosecution, they offered some possibilities, but
Yeah.
none of them were strong enough, it seems,
Right.
to convince that jury of premeditation.
Yeah, and I think that's where the whole concept of reasonable doubt
Right.
really comes into play, right?
Yeah.
Because the jurors, even though they found him guilty ultimately,
Mm-hmm.
they couldn't definitively say why he would have done it.
Yeah, do you think maybe they felt like
Yeah,
some of the possible motives were a stretch?
it's possible, right? Maybe the financial strain wasn't severe enough,
Right.
or those heated text messages
Yeah.
while they were troubling,
Yeah.
Maybe they didn't think those were enough to push someone to murder.
Let's go back to Marie Dalton's interview for a second.
Okay.
Because you mentioned that guilt that she seemed to be carrying.
What was it about her description of Dr. Sills' personality that really stood out to you?
Well, I think it was that phrase she used, that he was like a machine.
Yeah.
Like he was constantly needing compliments,
Yes.
validation, like almost emotionally.
Needy, yeah. It makes you think about,
Yeah.
what was that relationship with Suzanne really like?
And if we connect that back to the letter,
Yes.
he sent Marie just 2 weeks after Suzanne's death.
That letter,
Yeah.
it's so strange because it's oddly formal, right?
Really?
It almost reads like he was writing a business memo
Wow.
rather than like a personal letter to someone that he supposedly had feelings for.
And then calling her the original
Yeah, like Suzanne was just this
Yeah.
temporary,
placeholder.
placeholder. Yeah,
It's unsettling.
it is.
Isn't it?
It really is. And I mean, do you think it could be interpreted as a sign of his emotional detachment?
It It's possible, right?
Or even lack of remorse.
Yeah, like he was already moving on,
Right.
compartmentalized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to reconcile that image
Right.
with, the image that his children presented.
Right, the loving father.
The loving father, the devoted husband.
It's like we're dealing with two different versions
It's like two completely different people.
of the same man.
Yeah. And it makes you wonder, can someone be capable of both great love and horrific violence?
That's a question that goes way beyond this case.
Yeah.
It really taps into the complexity of human nature, right?
It does.
The dark side that can lurk beneath the surface.
It also makes you think about
Yeah.
how much we can ever really know
Right.
another person.
Yeah, even those closest to him,
Yeah.
his children, his colleagues,
They all seem shocked
Yeah.
by the accusations.
it makes you wonder if they were just completely blind to that side of him.
Right? Or were there signs?
Or were there subtle signs
Yeah.
that they just didn't recognize?
Or chose to ignore.
Exactly. And
Yep.
that speaks to the power of denial, doesn't it?
It really does.
The way we sometimes explain away behaviors that
Yeah.
don't quite fit the narrative we have of someone.
Yeah, it's like our minds want to create order out of chaos.
Absolutely.
We want to believe that people are either good or bad, innocent or guilty.
But it's rarely that black and white.
It's not.
Right.
It's really not.
And that's what makes these cases so important to examine.
I think so.
They challenge those assumptions
Yeah.
about human behavior.
Yeah.
They force us to grapple with the ambiguity,
Yeah.
and they remind us that the truth
Yeah.
is a very messy,
Multifaceted thing.
multifaceted thing.
And let's talk for a second about the media.
Okay.
Because the media really played a role
Yeah.
in this case, shaping public perception.
Yeah, those headlines.
Oh my gosh, like fertility doctor on trial for wife's murder, love triangle turns deadly.
It was sensationalized.
So sensationalized, yeah.
And I think that type of framing can really influence
Oh, absolutely.
how we view these cases, right?
It's like we're almost programmed
Yeah.
to see things through the lens of those crime dramas we all watch.
Right. We want the clear-cut heroes,
Yeah.
the villains, the resolution.
Yeah, the satisfying
But
resolution.
real life is just not like that.
It's not. It's so much more nuanced.
It is, which is why, sources like the 48 Hours episode we're looking at
Yeah.
are so valuable
Yeah.
because they try to offer those multiple perspectives.
Right, you-
They delve into those complexities and they give voice to the real people
Yes.
who were impacted.
It's crucial, especially in a case like this with
Yeah.
all these layers,
Yeah.
these unanswered questions.
It's a good reminder to be critical consumers of the information we see,
Yeah,
to question the narratives,
absolutely.
consider the sources, and recognize that truth can be very elusive.
Well said. And as we sort of move toward wrapping up this deep dive,
Okay.
I want to kind of circle back to some
Yeah.
of the unresolved aspects of the case.
The questions that linger,
The lingering questions, yeah.
even after the verdict.
Okay, so we talked about the lack of a clear motive.
Right.
But what about those other pieces of the puzzle?
Yeah, like the 911 call.
Yeah, the 911 call, the topless photo on Patrick.net.
Dr. Sills' behavior after Suzanne's death.
Yeah, how do those all
Issue.
factor into the bigger picture?
Do they point definitively to murder?
Right.
Or is it possible, as the defense argued, that there's a more innocent explanation?
Right.
Maybe Dr. Sills was just a flawed,
Yeah.
grieving husband
Yeah.
who made some bad decisions.
In the aftermath of an accident.
Exactly.
See, this is what's so fascinating about this case.
I know.
There is no easy answer.
It's not a neat resolution.
It's not. It forces you to weigh the evidence.
Like for yourself.
Yeah.
What do you believe?
And even then,
Yeah.
you're left with lingering doubts.
Absolutely. That's the nature of these complex cases.
Yeah.
They stay with you.
They do. They really do. And I think that's why we're all so drawn to true crime.
Right.
It's not just about the thrill of the mystery.
It's about the deeper questions, isn't it?
It is.
About human nature, about the justice system,
Yeah.
about the nature of truth itself.
And it's those questions
Yeah.
that make these deep dives so valuable, I think.
They challenge us to think critically,
Mhm.
engage with these complex issues.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not about finding all the answers. It's
Yeah.
just about learning to live with the ambiguity.
Yeah. So as we sort of wrap up this discussion of the
Mhm.
Suzanne Sills case,
Yeah.
I want to acknowledge that this case, with all the unanswered questions,
Yeah.
the doubts,
Yeah.
this is ultimately a human story.
It is, at the heart of it.
Yeah.
It's a story about love and loss,
Yeah,
betrayal and loyalty,
it is.
the complexity of human relationships,
It really is.
all wrapped up in this one tragic event.
Yeah, it really makes you think about the whole idea of closure.
Yeah,
Can there really be closure when there are so many unanswered questions?
that's a really good point. I mean, the legal system, right? They might provide a verdict,
Right.
guilty or not guilty, but
Yeah.
it doesn't always give you that emotional resolution
Yeah.
that people need, you know, who are impacted by these crimes.
And especially in a case like this,
Yeah.
where the circumstances around her death
Mhm.
are still so unclear.
It's so ambiguous. Yeah.
Suzanne's family lost a daughter, a sister, a friend.
Right.
And, while Dr. Sills' children maintain his innocence,
Yeah.
they've also lost their mother.
Right.
And they have to navigate this relationship now
Right.
with their father, who's in prison.
Yeah. It's complicated.
It's a really complicated grief, I think, for everyone involved.
Everyone. Yeah.
And it just shows that justice, in the, real sense of the word,
Mm-hmm.
can't always be achieved in a courtroom.
He can't.
There's the legal verdict,
Right.
but then there's the human element.
Exactly. All that emotional fallout,
Yeah.
the relationships that are shattered.
Yeah.
It's hard.
And that search for meaning.
Yeah.
I imagine it could be a lifelong journey for Suzanne's loved one.
Oh, absolutely.
How do you begin to make sense
Right.
of such a sudden and senseless loss?
And how do you reconcile the love you felt for someone
Right.
with the thought that their life might have ended in such a violent way?
And I think those are questions
Yeah.
that might never have negative answers.
And I think that's one of the things we struggle with the most as humans. We
Yeah.
want that certainty.
We want those puzzle pieces to fit together,
Exactly.
but sometimes they just don't.
Sometimes they stay scattered.
And we're left with this
Ambiguity.
ambiguity.
Yeah.
And we just have to learn to sit with that.
It makes you re-examine like your own beliefs,
Yeah.
about the world, about the people in your life.
Yeah, it's like
If something like this could happen to Suzanne Sills,
right.
couldn't it happen to anyone?
It's a chilling thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it really highlights,
Our vulnerability?
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Even in our own homes, with our loved ones,
That tragedy can strike
at any moment.
in an instant. Yeah. It's a reminder that life is precious
It is.
and unpredictable.
It really is.
And it makes me think about Suzanne's mother's statement,
Yeah.
about the staircase.
Right. A place for joy,
Yeah, for celebration.
celebrations, weddings.
And it became this,
A place of sorrow.
it's like a symbol of how quickly
Yeah,
things can shift.
absolutely.
Dreams can be shattered.
Yeah, and I think that image really speaks to the lasting impact, the ripple effect of this tragedy.
Yeah, and I think as we come to the end of this deep dive, it's
Yeah.
important to remember
Yeah,
that this case, with all its unanswered questions,
yeah.
it's ultimately a human story.
It is at its core.
Yeah.
Story about love and loss,
Yeah.
betrayal,
The complexity of the human heart.
the human heart.
Absolutely. And, as you go about your day today,
Mm-hmm.
let this case stay with you.
Let it spark some conversations,
Challenge your assumptions
Challenge your assumptions, yeah.
about people, about the world.
Yeah, because sometimes the most important lessons
Yeah.
aren't found in the verdicts,
Right.
but in the questions that we're left with.
Exactly. Because it's not always about finding all the answers.
It's not.
It's about embracing that complexity,
Yeah.
recognizing that ambiguity, and
Yeah.
just continuing to search for the meaning,
Even when the truth is hard to find.
even when the truth is elusive.
Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And to all of you listening out there, stay curious.
Keep asking those questions.
And we'll see you on our next deep dive.
See you next time.